Have you ever wondered why your thoughts have such a powerful grip on your life? Why is it that every time you face a challenge, you get swept up in the stories your mind creates, making you feel stuck and overwhelmed? What if you could break free from this cycle and live without being controlled by your thoughts? Welcome to Stillness Unfolded, where we dive deep into the secrets of the mind and discover how you can live freely without being bound by the endless chatter of your thoughts. In this video, we'll explore the power of awareness, how it can help you free yourself from the control of your mind and experience life with true peace and clarity. You'll learn why detaching from your thoughts is the key to real freedom and how to step into a life that is no longer dictated by your mental stories. Join me as we explore this fascinating topic, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section below to help us improve and bring you even more quality content. And remember, this video is packed with valuable information, so make sure you watch it all to fully grasp the concepts we're discussing. Chapter 1. Your mind is not you. From the moment we wake up, our minds are in constant motion. The thoughts begin almost immediately. Perhaps we're thinking about what we need to do during the day, remembering something we forgot, or even reflecting on something from the past. These thoughts often dictate the course of our day, shaping how we feel and act. One moment we feel confident, focused, or motivated, and in the next, we might spiral into worry, doubt, or fear. It can seem like our thoughts are in full control, steering us in ways we don't fully understand. We may find ourselves trapped in cycles of worry, self-doubt, or regret, and these thoughts begin to feel like truths about who we are. The mind, it seems, has a powerful grip on us. We react to its impulses and take its stories as fact. When we wake up feeling anxious about the day ahead, we may start to think, "I'm not good enough to handle everything," or "this day is going to be overwhelming." Without realizing it, we begin to identify ourselves with these fleeting, momentary thoughts. We think they are an accurate reflection of reality. The reality, however, is much more profound and liberating. Your thoughts are not you. They are not permanent. They are not even a reflection of who you are deep down. Instead, thoughts are transient, like clouds drifting across the sky. At one moment, you may find yourself lost in a thought that causes you distress, a worry, or a fear, but just as quickly, that thought fades, replaced by something else. Maybe a completely different worry or a new idea enters the mind. These thoughts come and go, but we often hold on to them as if they are the absolute truth of our existence. Buddhism teaches us that nothing is permanent, not even our thoughts. The Buddha emphasized impermanence throughout his teachings, stating that nothing whatsoever should be clung to as I or mine. This teaching is profound because it invites us to question everything we think we know about ourselves. How often do we cling to our thoughts as if they are permanent? How often do we define ourselves by what the mind tells us about our worth, our identity, or our place in the world? When we mistake our thoughts for our identity, we are essentially clinging to something that is constantly changing and shifting. This misunderstanding creates suffering. The mind, in its transient nature, is constantly producing thoughts, but none of them are permanent. When we see our thoughts as impermanent, we begin to realize that they do not define us. They are simply passing moments, just like waves in the ocean, each one coming and going. I've been there, feeling overwhelmed by the constant flow of thoughts. It's easy to get lost in them, believing that every thought has a deep meaning or that each one is a reflection of some truth about myself. Negative thoughts, especially, can be powerful. They may tell you that you're not enough or that you won't succeed. At one point, I used to believe every thought I had. If I felt anxious about something, I assumed it meant I wasn't ready or capable. If I had a thought of failure, I believed it meant I was doomed to fail. But as I began to practice observing my thoughts rather than becoming them, I realized how much peace I had been missing. It's like watching a storm pass by. At first, the storm feels overwhelming. Winds are strong, the rain comes pouring down, and it's easy to feel like you're trapped in it. But when you step back and see the storm from a safe distance, you realize that you are not the storm itself. You are the one observing it. In that moment, you become detached from its intensity, and the storm loses its grip on you. The same is true for our thoughts. When we stop identifying with every thought and learn to observe them, we begin to realize that they are not as powerful as we once believed. They are like passing clouds in the sky. Some days are stormy, others are clear and peaceful. But none of these moments define who we are. They are just part of the ever-changing landscape of the mind. There is freedom in recognizing that our thoughts are not who we are. This understanding brings a sense of liberation because it allows us to stop holding on to every thought that arises. When we identify with our thoughts, we are essentially allowing them to control our emotions, actions, and sense of self. But when we take a step back and observe our thoughts from a distance, we can see them for what they truly are: temporary, ever-changing, and not a reflection of our true essence. The more I practiced this observation, the more I noticed how my emotional reactions started to shift. I became less reactive to my thoughts, especially the negative ones. The constant stream of thoughts that once seemed so urgent and important started to lose their power. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by every anxious thought, I learned to simply notice it without judgment. This subtle shift has brought so much peace into my life. It's not that the thoughts stop coming. They continue to flow, as thoughts do. But now, I no longer feel that I have to act on every thought that arises. I can simply acknowledge it, see it for what it is, and let it pass. The power lies not in controlling the thoughts, but in learning to witness them without attachment. And with this practice, I've begun to experience a new level of inner peace. This is what the Buddha meant when he spoke of detaching from the mind's fluctuations. The more we can observe our thoughts without identifying with them, the more we become free from the tyranny of the mind. It's as if we've stepped out of the storm and into a place of stillness, where we can simply watch the thoughts come and go. We are not defined by them. We are the one observing them. And in that observation, we find freedom. The true essence of who we are is not found in the thoughts that arise within the mind. It is found in the awareness that can observe those thoughts without becoming entangled in them. When we realize this, we begin to experience life in a completely new way, one where we are not at the mercy of our thoughts, but rather, we are the peaceful observer of them. And that is where true freedom lies. Chapter 2. How the Mind Works. If thoughts are not who we are, then what exactly is the mind? What does it do, and how does it operate? At its core, the mind is a storyteller. It continuously spins narratives about who we are, what's happening in our lives, and how we should react to the world around us. This is its primary function: to interpret, to organize, and to make sense of the constant stream of sensory input we receive from the world. The mind is incredibly powerful. It has the ability to take raw experiences and turn them into elaborate stories, often creating meaning where none exists. For example, let's say you're walking down the street and you catch a glimpse of a stranger's expression. Your mind might immediately interpret that look as disapproval, even though the person may have been distracted or simply lost in thought. It could be that their expression had nothing to do with you at all, but your mind creates a story that tells you otherwise. In a different scenario, another person in the same situation might interpret the look as neutral or even empathetic. The same external event, seeing a stranger's face, can be experienced in entirely different ways based on the stories our minds create. One mind might attach negativity and self-doubt to the situation, while another mind might remain unaffected, seeing the moment for what it truly is, a passing interaction with no inherent meaning. This is a clear illustration of one of the fundamental truths of Buddhism. Suffering doesn't arise from the external world. It comes from how our minds interpret the world. What happens around us is often out of our control. We can't dictate what others think, how the weather will behave, or the circumstances we find ourselves in. But we do have control over how we respond to these situations. How we react to life's challenges is determined by the mental stories we create in response to what happens. Buddhism teaches that the mind is not a reliable guide. It is constantly changing, always telling us stories that we might mistake for truth. Our thoughts are influenced by our past experiences, our emotional reactions, and our subconscious beliefs. When we take these mental stories as facts, we get trapped in a cycle of suffering. We suffer because we believe the narratives our mind creates, without questioning them. But the moment we step back and observe these stories, we begin to see that they are just that, stories. Consider this. When you're in a stressful situation and your mind starts to race with worry, that worry is based on an imagined story. Your mind creates scenarios that haven't even happened yet. For example, You might find yourself thinking about an upcoming meeting at work, and your mind starts to spin a narrative about how you'll perform poorly, how others will judge you, and how your career might be at risk. None of these things have happened yet, but the mind creates a whole storyline, and you start reacting to it emotionally. The more you buy into this narrative, the more real it feels, even though it's just a mental creation. This brings us to another central point in Buddhism. The mind is a process, not a permanent entity. The mind is constantly shifting, producing thoughts in a continuous flow. Just like a river constantly produces new waves, the mind produces a continuous stream of thoughts. But no single wave is the entire river, and no single thought is the entirety of the mind. We mistake the temporary nature of thoughts for something permanent when, in fact, thoughts are fleeting. We often treat thoughts as if they are the ultimate truth about our lives, and this leads to suffering. If we start to believe that a single thought represents who we are, we risk identifying with it and letting it define our entire reality. When the mind tells us that we are not good enough, we start to internalize that thought and believe it. We start identifying with the thought, as though it is a reflection of our identity, when in reality, it is just a passing mental event. When we let go of the need to believe in the truth of every thought, we can free ourselves from the cycle of suffering that arises from attaching ourselves to these fleeting ideas. This realization completely shifted my perspective. I used to be obsessed with what others thought of me. Every small interaction, every word spoken in passing, would cause me to spiral into self-doubt and insecurity. I would replay conversations in my mind, wondering if I had said the wrong thing or misjudged a situation. Small, insignificant events would escalate in my mind into grand narratives of failure and rejection. I became consumed by these mental stories, believing them to be truths about myself and my worth. But when I learned that my thoughts were simply stories created by my mind, stories that I had the power to rewrite, everything changed. I started to see my thoughts for what they were, just mental patterns, not immutable truths. The stories I had been telling myself about my failures, my insecurities, and my self-doubt were not who I was. They were simply the product of the mind's constant narrative-making process. This insight brought a deep sense of liberation. I no longer felt like I had to be bound by the stories my mind was creating. Instead of letting my mind tell me that I wasn't enough, I started to question these stories and, eventually, rewrite them. The process of letting go of the narratives that had been holding me back was not immediate, but it was transformative. It was like breaking free from a cage I hadn't realized I had built around myself. When I stopped identifying with the mental stories I had been living in, I felt a sense of space open up in my mind. I was no longer trapped in the narratives of worry, fear, and self-doubt. The mind's constant flow of thoughts continued, but I learned to observe them without getting lost in them. I could see them for what they were, temporary, fleeting, and ultimately insignificant in defining my true self. The more I practiced observing my thoughts without judgment, the more I realized how much power I had in shaping my own experience. The stories my mind told me no longer had the power to define me. I could choose to engage with them, or I could simply watch them pass by, without getting caught up in their drama. This shift in perspective gave me a newfound sense of freedom, one that allowed me to live more fully and authentically, without the constant weight of mental narratives dictating my reality. The mind, in its ceaseless storytelling, can be a powerful force, but it is also a tool that we can learn to use with wisdom. By understanding how the mind works, we can begin to untangle ourselves from the stories it creates and start living a life that is free from the confines of mental narratives. Chapter 3: The Suffering We Create. Buddhism introduces a powerful concept known as the two arrows. The first arrow represents the unavoidable pain we experience in life: loss, disappointment, mistakes, failures. These are the inevitable parts of the human experience, and we all face them. No one is exempt from pain. Whether it's losing a loved one, facing failure at work, or enduring a painful breakup, suffering is a natural part of life. These moments of pain are the first arrow. They are external events, circumstances that arise and challenge us, and they are often out of our control. The second arrow, however, is where the suffering truly begins. This second arrow is the suffering we create by our reaction to the first arrow. When we experience pain, our minds have a tendency to replay the event over and over again, layering it with judgment, shame, guilt, or regret. We take the initial pain, such as the loss of a job, and we keep reliving it in our minds, sometimes for days or even years, adding thoughts like, "I should have done this differently," or "Why did this happen to me?" These mental reactions create additional suffering, often making the original pain feel even worse. The Buddha used a simple analogy to illustrate this. Imagine you've been shot by an arrow. The arrow causes physical pain, but it's the second arrow, the one you shoot into yourself with your thoughts, that creates lasting suffering. The first arrow, the initial pain, is unavoidable and a part of life. But the second arrow, the mental suffering that we inflict upon ourselves through overthinking and negative self-talk, is optional. It's important to note that the first arrow, pain, is a natural part of being human. We cannot escape it. But the second arrow is where we have a choice. When we continue to replay painful memories, ruminate on past mistakes, or judge ourselves harshly, we are essentially shooting ourselves with the second arrow, compounding our suffering. And yet, the second arrow is something we can control. By learning to detach from the mind's tendency to hold on to these thoughts and judgments, we can stop shooting the second arrow and reduce our suffering. This concept was life-changing for me. I used to find myself stuck in the second arrow, dwelling on past mistakes or things I couldn't change. If I had a tough conversation with someone, I would replay it endlessly in my mind, wondering if I had said the wrong thing, if they disliked me, or if I had made a fool of myself. Even if the conversation was over and done with, my mind would continue to torment me, recycling the same doubts and insecurities. It was exhausting and emotionally draining. The pain from the original situation would fade, but the mental replaying kept it alive, making me feel as if it was happening all over again. It wasn't just conversations. If something didn't go the way I planned, or if I made a mistake at work, I would stew over it. I would think about what I could have done differently, what went wrong, or why I wasn't good enough. These thoughts would replay in my mind constantly, causing stress and anxiety. Instead of learning from the situation and moving forward, I kept myself stuck in the past, unable to escape the loop of regret. But once I started practicing mindfulness and became more aware of my thoughts, I began to recognize when I was adding the second arrow. I could see how my mind was recreating the pain and magnifying it by attaching judgment and regret to it. I realized that I was making the situation worse by holding on to these thoughts. Instead of letting go, I was allowing myself to suffer unnecessarily. When I started to notice these patterns, I made a conscious effort to change how I reacted to pain. Instead of allowing my thoughts to spiral into self-judgment and regret, I learned to simply observe them without attaching any further meaning to them. I would remind myself that the pain of the first arrow had already passed, and there was no need to add more suffering by replaying it in my mind. I started practicing letting go of thoughts that didn't serve me, and the more I did this, the easier it became. It was as if I had unlocked the door to a room of peace that had always been there, just waiting for me to walk through. By stopping the cycle of mental suffering, I was able to let go of the past and be more present in the moment. I didn't need to keep punishing myself for things I couldn't change. I could learn from my mistakes, but I didn't have to carry the weight of them forever. This shift in mindset didn't happen overnight, but with consistent practice, I became better at noticing when I was adding the second arrow. The more I practiced mindfulness, the more I realized that I had the power to stop the mental replay. I no longer needed to keep my painful experiences alive by overthinking them. I could choose to release them and free myself from unnecessary suffering. The second arrow is the mind's tendency to hold on to pain, to keep reliving it, and to add layers of judgment, shame, and regret. But we don't have to fall into this trap. With mindfulness and awareness, we can learn to observe our thoughts without becoming attached to them. We can recognize when the second arrow is being fired and choose to put it down. Buddhism teaches us that suffering is not an inevitable part of life. It is our reaction to pain that creates prolonged suffering. The first arrow is inevitable, but the second arrow is optional. The more we can detach from the mental chatter that amplifies pain, the less we will suffer. We don't have to keep shooting ourselves with the second arrow. We can choose to stop the cycle and find freedom from mental suffering. By recognizing when we are adding the second arrow, we reclaim our power and move toward a place of inner peace. We can learn to live in the present, free from the weight of past regrets and anxieties. The key is in recognizing that while pain is a part of life, suffering doesn't have to be. We have the ability to choose how we respond to pain, and in doing so, we free ourselves from the grip of unnecessary suffering. Chapter 4. The Power of Awareness. So how do we begin to break free from the cycle of suffering? The answer lies in awareness. Awareness is the key to freeing ourselves from the grip of our thoughts. The mind has an incredible ability to create stories, distort reality, and lead us into patterns of suffering. However, the moment we become aware of this process, we can start to detach ourselves from it. When we observe our thoughts without identifying with them, we gain a sense of freedom. We no longer feel controlled by the constant churn of the mind. Instead, we become the observers of these thoughts, watching them arise and fade without getting caught up in their narrative. Awareness is not about eliminating thoughts or trying to stop them from appearing. The goal isn't to achieve a blank mind, as that would be unrealistic. Thoughts will always arise. They are an inherent part of being human. The real practice is learning how to observe these thoughts without reacting to them. When we practice awareness, we train ourselves to recognize that thoughts are just thoughts. They are not facts, and they do not define us. One of the most powerful ways to cultivate awareness is through meditation. Specifically, Vipassana meditation, which is sometimes called insight meditation, is designed to help us observe thoughts, feelings, and sensations with clear, non-judgmental awareness. In Vipassana, you sit in silence, focusing on your breath, and whenever thoughts arise, you acknowledge them, but you don't engage with them. You simply allow them to come and go like clouds drifting across the sky. As you sit in meditation, you'll notice that thoughts will pop up almost automatically. Maybe you'll start thinking about a conversation you had earlier, or perhaps a worry will surface about something in the future. The temptation is to follow these thoughts, to get involved in their stories, and become lost in them. But the practice of awareness is learning to do the opposite. Instead of engaging, you simply notice the thought and let it pass. You acknowledge it, but you don't attach any meaning to it. You don't judge it, and you don't react. At first, this might feel difficult. The mind is accustomed to following thoughts, and it can be challenging to break that habit. But over time, as you continue this practice, you begin to see a shift. Instead of being swept away by every thought, you begin to notice the space between the thought and your reaction. That moment of space is incredibly powerful. It is the point at which you have the ability to choose. You can choose whether to follow the thought and let it lead to more thinking, or you can choose to let it go and return to the present moment. This space between thought and reaction is where true freedom lies. It is in this space that we can interrupt the cycle of suffering that our minds often create. By simply noticing our thoughts without reacting to them, we stop reinforcing the mental patterns that lead to anxiety, stress, and self-doubt. We begin to create a new relationship with our minds, one based on observation and awareness rather than identification and attachment. Over time, with regular meditation practice, the ability to remain present and non-reactive grows stronger. You'll start to notice more moments throughout your day where you can observe your thoughts without getting caught up in them. For example, when you're faced with a stressful situation at work, instead of automatically jumping into a spiral of worry and overthinking, you might notice the thought arise and recognize it for what it is, a temporary mental event that doesn't define your reality. This awareness gives you the power to respond more consciously, rather than reacting impulsively or emotionally. When I first started meditating, it was incredibly difficult. My mind was constantly racing, jumping from one thought to the next, and it felt almost impossible to simply observe my thoughts without reacting. At the beginning, I thought there was something wrong with me because I couldn't seem to quiet my mind. I wanted to be calm and still, but instead, I felt overwhelmed by the constant barrage of thoughts. However, as I continued to meditate, I started to realize that my mind wasn't my enemy. It wasn't something to be fought against. The mind was simply a tool that needed to be trained. And just like any tool, it requires patience, practice, and consistency to use it effectively. With time, I started to get better at it. The more I practiced observing my thoughts without engaging with them, the more peaceful I became. I began to notice patterns in my thinking, certain stories or beliefs that would come up repeatedly. I could see how my mind would try to latch onto these stories, turning them into something real and concrete. But by practicing awareness, I was able to step back and recognize that these were just stories, not truths. This shift in perspective was profound. Instead of getting wrapped up in whatever thought arose, I started to feel more grounded in the present moment. I learned to observe the thought, acknowledge it, and then let it go. It was like gaining a sense of distance from the constant noise of the mind. The more I practiced, the clearer this distinction became. As I continued with my meditation practice, I noticed that I felt less anxiety and less stress. My mind was no longer ruling me. I had become the one in control. It wasn't that my mind stopped creating thoughts. It still did, but I had gained the ability to observe those thoughts without reacting. This simple shift made all the difference. The more I practiced mindfulness and meditation, the more I felt a sense of peace in my life. I wasn't overwhelmed by every worry or thought that arose. I could simply let it pass. This sense of inner peace gave me more clarity, allowing me to respond to life's challenges with greater wisdom and composure. It felt like I had unlocked a deeper level of freedom, a freedom that came not from escaping my thoughts, but from observing them with non-attachment. The power of awareness is in the ability to witness your thoughts without becoming entangled in them. When we become aware of the fleeting nature of our thoughts, we free ourselves from their grip. The more we practice awareness, the more we realize that we are not our thoughts. We are the awareness that watches them. And in this awareness, we find the space to live more fully without being controlled by the mental patterns that once held us captive. Chapter 5: Living Beyond Thoughts. Ultimately, the goal is to live beyond the thoughts that once defined us. When we begin to stop identifying with our thoughts, we start to experience life in a radically different way. Our minds are no longer in the driver's seat. We take back control. Instead of becoming caught in the endless stream of thoughts, we shift our position and become the observer of them. We no longer allow thoughts to dictate our emotions, decisions, or reactions. Instead, we recognize them for what they are: transient mental events that come and go. This shift is profound because it changes how we experience life. When we stop identifying with our thoughts, the grip they have on us loosens. The constant self-talk, judgment, and narratives that once shaped our perceptions of ourselves and the world no longer have the same power. True freedom is not found in escaping our thoughts, but in seeing them for what they truly are: temporary, fleeting events that have no real power unless we allow them to. At the core of this shift is the realization that we are not our thoughts. We are the awareness that is observing them. This understanding gives us the power to separate ourselves from the constant mental noise, and when we do that, life becomes clearer. We start to experience the world as it truly is, free from the distortions created by our thoughts. Without the filter of judgments, past experiences, and assumptions, we begin to see the present moment as it really is, uncluttered by mental projections or fears about the future. True freedom doesn't lie in trying to avoid our thoughts or suppress them. It's not about pretending that they don't exist or forcing our minds into silence. Instead, freedom comes from learning to recognize the impermanence of our thoughts and not attaching to them. Thoughts arise and fade, just like waves on the ocean. When we stop clinging to them, we can allow them to pass without holding on to their emotional charge. This realization is a profound one. We begin to understand that we don't need to follow every thought. Just because a thought arises doesn't mean it defines us, nor does it mean we must act on it. We become the observer, the conscious witness, who watches the thoughts come and go without engaging with them. This simple awareness opens the door to a new way of being, where we are no longer at the mercy of our minds. Personal insight. Through this journey, I've learned that true mindfulness isn't about avoiding the challenges of life. It's about facing them with clarity and composure. Early on in my practice, I thought that mindfulness would give me a way to escape from life's difficulties, a way to stay in a constant state of peace and calm. But as I continued, I realized that mindfulness doesn't shield us from the struggles of life. It helps us navigate those struggles with a sense of inner peace, regardless of external circumstances. When I'm able to observe my thoughts instead of reacting to them, I find that I can approach life's challenges with greater wisdom and equanimity. Take stress, for example. In the past, I would allow stress to take over my mind completely. A looming deadline, a challenging conversation, or an uncertain future would trigger a wave of anxiety. My thoughts would spiral, telling me I wasn't prepared, that I couldn't handle it, that I was failing. But now, I notice these thoughts without identifying with them. I observe them as they arise, knowing that they are temporary and will pass. I don't let them dictate how I feel or how I react. Instead, I acknowledge the stress, feel it without judgment, and let it go. This practice of simply observing without engaging has made it much easier to face life's challenges with a sense of calm. Mindfulness is not about pushing away stress or anxiety, but about acknowledging them and not allowing them to control us. The path of mindfulness is not easy. It requires consistent practice, patience, and a willingness to look inward. There are days when my mind is particularly noisy, and I find myself swept away in the stories it creates. But with each day of practice, I get better at noticing when I'm caught up in thought. And the more I practice, the more I experience a sense of freedom. Freedom from the relentless pull of the mind, from the constant stream of judgments, doubts, and fears. It's like learning to ride a bike. At first, it feels wobbly, difficult, and frustrating. But with persistence, we begin to find our balance. The more we practice, the easier it becomes to remain centered and grounded, no matter what thoughts arise. We begin to experience life more fully, without the constant interference of the mind's stories. True freedom comes from no longer being ruled by the stories in our minds, whether those stories are about who we are, what we're capable of, or what we think we should be doing. When we live beyond the thoughts that once defined us, we step into a new way of being, a way of being that is rooted in the present moment, clear, open, and free from the past or the future. We are not controlled by our fears, our judgments, or the narratives our minds create. We experience life directly, without distortion, and in doing so, we tap into a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. This is the power of living beyond our thoughts. This is the power of true awareness. So, there you have it. How to begin freeing yourself from the endless cycle of thoughts and start living a life of true awareness and freedom. I hope these insights have helped you understand the power of detaching from your thoughts and how it can lead to a more peaceful, fulfilling life. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our future content from Stillness Unfolded. Don't forget to leave your comments below and share your thoughts, as it helps the channel grow and improve. Wishing you a peaceful mind and a life full of clarity.